All right, so welcome everyone. My name is Michelle Obrokwa, and I am a fourth-year medical student at the New York Medical College. I wanted to welcome you all to the start of the Sowing Seeds Specialty Series. This week, we will be focusing on the specialty of anesthesiology. This series is a part of our Sowing Seeds program, created during the pandemic and continued by our national president, Chantel Thompson, in collaboration with the Alumni Affairs Committee. Throughout this year-long program, we will provide resources on how to succeed as a pre-medical and a medical student, and we'll touch on everything from financial literacy to preparing for board exams and more. So make sure you are a national member by visiting thesnma.org and signing up to stay in the know. So now, on to our panelists. I have the distinct honor of introducing each of them to you before beginning our Q&A session. We will be saving audience questions for the end of this program. Up first, we have Dr. John Patton. Now, Dr. Patton is an assistant professor in regional anesthesia and acute pain medicine at the UCLA Department of Anesthesiology and Perioperative Medicine. Dr. Patton? Late. Got it. So Dr. John Patton is late. So we're going to go ahead and move on to Dr. Belinda McAdoo. Dr. McAdoo is an assistant professor and co-chair of the Residency Recruitment Committee at Emory University.
Hi, thank you for that introduction. As she said, I'm Belinda McAdoo. I'm an anesthesiologist at Emory University Hospital in Atlanta. I'm originally from Little Rock, Arkansas, and I did medical school and residency at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences. Do you want me to tell a little bit about anything at this point?
That's completely fine for now.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. McAdoo.
Yeah.
So up next, we have Dr. Stephen Bradley. Now, Dr. Bradley is a fellow at the McLean Center for Clinical Medical Ethics.
Hey, everybody, I'm Stephen. I'm an anesthesiologist and clinical medical ethicist, currently practicing on active duty in the United States Navy. I'm stationed at Naval Medical Center, Portsmouth, and I am an assistant professor of anesthesiology at Uniformed Services University of Health Science. So happy to be joining you guys tonight.
Thank you so much for the introductions. Next up, we have Dr. Liddy Martinez. Dr. Martinez is a PGY4 at UCLA. Dr. Martinez? Looks like we're having a few technical difficulties, so I'll go ahead and move on to Dr. Uzoamaka Odomena. She is a PGY2 at the University of Rochester.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Uzoamaka Odomena. I'm a second-year anesthesiology resident at the University of Rochester Medical Center. I am originally from Maryland by way of Nigeria. I attended medical school at New York Medical College, and I'm glad to be among everybody and looking forward to this panel.
Great. Thank you all so much to our panelists for introducing yourselves. We will now be moving on to the sharing of each of your personal stories. So if each of you could talk a little bit about where you trained for medical school and where you are now and how that experience and that transition has been for you, I'd greatly appreciate it. Well, actually, before that, we have Dr. Martinez on now. She could introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, my computer literally just died on me, but I'm Lydia Esther Martinez. I go by Liddy, and I am a PGY4 at UCLA.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez. So once again, if you all could just share where you went to medical school, where you are now, and how that journey has looked for you, we would all greatly appreciate that.
I'm happy to start. I'll say that I feel like I lucked into anesthesiology. When I started my third-year rotations, anesthesia was literally the first rotation I had. And so I was able to compare things to that as I went along. And I found that compared to other specialties I rotated through on anesthesiology, the day had its own momentum. So I would get started, I'd be learning, I'd be doing things, and then all of a sudden the day would be done. And it was just really exciting for me to have a day that you didn't watch the clock, that just kind of moved on its own. So you kind of felt like you were in the zone. So from there, I chose anesthesiology. Again, I was at University of Arkansas for medical sciences for medical school, and I stayed there for residency. And then my husband and I were looking to move to a bigger city, but something still Southern. And so I looked around the Atlanta area, and I wasn't specifically looking for academics, but once I started to interview at the different practices, it seemed to be the best fit for what I was looking to get out of it, especially coming straight out of residency. I still wanted to be in a learning environment. And so when you're teaching, you absolutely are learning. And so I've been at Emory since 2008.
Thank you so much for sharing, Dr. McAdoo.
Hey, so I am currently, like I said, practicing on active duty in the Navy. Stephen, I went to medical school at the Howard University, Washington, D.C., one of the best decisions of my life. After Howard, I went to the University of Chicago Medical Center for the 4-year categorical anesthesiology residency program. I kind of lucked into anesthesia as well because I had a classmate who was super excited about it. And the national conference was in DC when I was a 3rd-year medical student. I absolutely loved my time in residency. I loved residency. I loved the ICU rotation mostly. And eventually, once I'm done with my military service commitment, which is done next July, I'm going to be returning to University of Chicago to complete a critical care fellowship. After finishing residency in 2018, I moved to Portsmouth, Virginia, kind of 7 cities, Norfolk, Virginia Beach area, to start my practice on active duty in the Navy. It's academic practice, along with some other extra stuff kind of mixed in with the as part of the military. And I do get to teach and work with residents, and really been working on building my niche in medical ethics as well.
Thank you for sharing, Dr. Bradley.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Liddy. I actually grew up in Inglewood, California, but born in Nicaragua in Central America. I went to undergrad at UC San Diego. I ended up taking actually 4 years off in between med school and undergrad. So I had this amazing opportunity to work in DC. I got to work on the Hill. I got to be an intern at the White House and then do a fellowship at the CDC. And that was all in line with my plan of becoming a family medicine physician. I was hoping to go into public health. And it, again, similar to everyone, I kind of felt like I fell into it also. My sister actually went to medical school too. She was a year older, and she told me during her rotations that she really enjoyed anesthesia, but she had already chosen internal medicine. She was telling me, oh, you should check it out. I think it would definitely fit your personality style, the kind of work that you like to do. Very different from family medicine, obviously, but I decided to give it a chance. I ended up looking for mentors. I had amazing people vouch for me, and I ended up really loving it. I felt like I got to do a lot of procedures that was very different from family medicine, going to the clinic daily. I got to work in the operating room. You know, when starting your 3rd-year rotations, for myself at least, I heard a lot. You're always a medical student that either they tell you that you either run to codes or run away from codes when you hear the codes being called over the hospital alarm system. And so I just felt like I was just the kind of person who would run to the codes. I wanted to see what was happening. I wanted to see patients get resuscitated. What was the workflow like? And so I definitely felt like it fit my personality style. And doing residency at UCLA, forgot to mention I went to medical school at University of Illinois in Chicago. Absolutely loved it there. And now I'm here, and this is home, so I'm hoping to stay on and see where I go next year. I'll keep you guys updated.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Martinez. And just a word to the audience, please feel free to ask questions in the comments section. We have these amazing people here to answer your questions, so please feel free to ask them. Up next, we have Dr. Uzoamaka Odomena.
Hi, everyone. So as I mentioned before, I was born and raised in Maryland, Nigerian by culture. And I did all of my schooling in Maryland up until undergrad, which I did in Pennsylvania. So I went to the Lincoln University, which is the first HBCU, although I'm very familiar with Howard as well because I grew up in the DMV. And I then I took 2 years off. I worked a bit, had a few experiences, and then I went to New York Medical College. And during that time, during my third year, I also did a third-year rotation in anesthesia. But before that, my initial introduction was actually during my OBGYN rotation. So I was going in, with the mother when they're about to do the C-section, and the anesthesiologist and the anesthesia resident would always be there doing the spinal. And they would often call me over and ask me to observe them, and they would explain what they were doing. And I thought it was so interesting. So the way my school worked, we only had one month elective, and you could only choose one specialty. So I already chose GI. But then after that experience, I switched to anesthesia, and I absolutely loved the specialty. It was like the only thing that I really enjoyed. I was getting worried through third year because I'm like, every rotation I did, I was like, I can really appreciate this, but I can't see myself doing it. And finally, when I got to anesthesia, I was like, oh, I could actually see myself doing this. And like Dr. McAdoo said, I feel like the day would fly by. That could also be because I was getting out at like 12 or 1 as a med student, but that's neither here nor there. But now, of course, in residency, your schedule is a little bit different. But I really, really enjoy anesthesia so far. I'm still a junior resident, so it's really nice to also be hearing everyone else's experiences here.
Thank you so much for sharing. My next question is, could you describe the traits that you believe you possess that have allowed you to thrive as an anesthesiologist? Anyone can answer the question.
I would say probably more than anything is a degree of emotional intelligence to be able to read the room and communicate effectively without inciting panic or fear or stress, but getting everyone to kind of focus on the task and keeping things organized. Because in the OR as an anesthesiologist, a lot of times you're the captain of the ship, and people are going to follow your lead based on how you're responding to a stressful situation or how, serious to take a certain event that's occurring. And a lot of what we do is doing things precisely, effectively, without showing panic. And so that's something I try to practice in my general life, also with my kids as well. But it really serves me well as an anesthesiologist.
Thank you for sharing. Would anybody else like to answer the question? If not, we do have an audience question.
Yeah. Yeah, I would echo. Dr. McAdoo took the words right out of my mouth. Emotional intelligence is huge. Communication is also a thing that we really pride ourselves on in a world where, there's different types of people that do anesthesia, but from a medical perspective, as physicians, you have 4 years of medical school and you have a 4-year residency program. So you have this extremely broad wealth of knowledge. And you're able to communicate that. And that's part of our value to our surgical colleagues, to our patients, that we're able to take their unique medical histories and communicate what our concerns are for the anesthetic, communicate what our concerns are if you're talking about the hospital and what resources they have and how many anesthetizing locations they can run, or if you're even working through contract management. So communication skills are huge, both in and out of the operating room.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Would you guys be able to share if you had mentors in the field as you progressed along your respective journeys?
My first mentors in college and medical school were not anesthesiologists, but I did gain some mentors as anesthesiologists once I started the residency. And for me, those were just kind of self-selected people that I wanted to model my practice out after, people that I respected. And I just sought those out myself and started to make connections, asking them questions, setting up meetings with them. So I think for the viewers to know, you don't have to have a mentor assigned to you, and your first mentor doesn't have to be in the specialty that you plan to enter, because there's a lot of good advice that can give that's not specialty specific. But once you decide on your specialty, find people that you look up to and just reach out to them. And most people are very open to guiding you along the way. And you may have mentors that serve different purposes.
Would anyone else like to comment on their experience with having mentors or possibly serving as a mentor in anesthesiology?
Yes, I would agree with Dr. McAdoo. I sought out mentors during my rotation, but a lot of the people that mentored me ended up being people I knew just from either growing up or meeting them along the path to med school, who ended up going into anesthesiology, because I found like so many of the people in my network ended up going into anesthesia. So I had a lot of mentors that were just a little bit above me, like other like residents, and then I had mentors who were like either program directors or faculty at other institutions. So I think for me, one thing that works is kind of having like a kind of a broad net, like, because you get different ideas from different people, and I found that I got a little bit more support from like my wider network, just kind of the people that was able to relate with more. So I would agree, like sometimes you don't know, like the people that you already have in your network can be really good mentors too. And then cold emailing, I find that cold emailing like works a lot easier when you're in med school, because I remember being an undergrad, like you would get no response a lot, but in med school, whenever I cold email, like almost everybody responds. Especially if they're interested in their field, and anesthesia is a field that people are always really welcoming and really encouraging you. So I would say definitely mentorship is something that is extremely helpful. And even with social media, I have mentors from people that I've met on social media. Some of the panelists today were people I followed on social media before I even matched into anesthesia too. So there's a lot that you can get access to if you're not in med school yet as well. So.
Yeah, the strength of your residency program can really open doors, because a lot of these academic programs, you'll have faculty members that have far-reaching influences to other programs. You'll have alumni from your medical school or your residency program that are in different places that you can reach out to. My best mentor, honestly, is actually an ear, nose, and throat surgeon in Chicago, and I rotated on a month of ENT surgery as an intern. And this surgeon has been invaluable to me, has helped me make several career decisions, and is still available for any time that I need to talk to her or pick her brain. So you can even look outside the specialty depending on what you need.
Okay. If there are no additional comments, we can go ahead and move on to the audience questions. Vera Toby asked, what are your favorite and worst parts of being a practicing anesthesiologist?
I mentioned it in the chat. I'm not a morning person. I hate mornings. I don't wake up till I'm in the shower. But then by the time I get to work, I'm super excited to start the day, and I really love the things that we get to do, the hands-on procedures, gaining that patient's trust in a short period of time.
I would say my favorite thing is that every day is different. You don't know exactly what to expect. You can kind of know what cases you're going into, but each patient brings their individual medical history and individual challenges. And so you just can't get bored. You're constantly learning. I love that about anesthesia, that every day is full of variety.
I think as a resident now, looking back at my med school experience, it was definitely a 180. Like somebody was mentioning earlier, like as a medical student, you know, they let you out super early. It could be 12 noon, 2 p.m., and you're good to go for the day. But in residency, it's a complete 180. Sometimes we work 60 to 70-hour weeks. So you definitely can't shy away from hard work. And that's why it's good, again, to reemphasize the mentorship aspect of it. Because it's one thing, you know, another colleague, another med student saying like, oh, I'm interested in the field. This is why we should go into it. But it's another thing hearing it from a resident's perspective or a practicing anesthesiologist perspective, because even looking at private practices right now, or looking into staying academics for myself as a career, again, it's even more different from a resident. Like I mentioned, residents were working like 60, 70, 80 hours a week at times. And then some of the practicing physicians, they're telling me like it gets a million times better. You know, you have your own schedule. You could call out so many days off. You get this much vacation. You get to work with residents. You know, sometimes they're the ones running the rooms. You're just like overseeing. So it's a completely different aspect of it. So it's good to, you know, have those mentors at every single level, whether it's like your peers telling you like, oh, this is why I was interested and maybe you should check it out, to senior mentors who already know the field really well and could advise you like, okay, but these are really downsides of the field and could be honest with you.
I think one of my favorite parts is that at this stage in residency, I get to be one-on-one with my patients whenever I'm taking care of them. When you become an attending, a lot of times you run more than one room and you're supervising people. But depending on where you go to practice, you can also be one-on-one as well. So, but it's kind of nice to just be able to focus on my patient. I'm not getting pages about orders and stuff like that throughout the day and not rounding. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And then I guess something I would say, I won't say it's the worst part or something I dislike, but something I'm curious about is that it's what we do also is dependent on somebody else generally. If you go into pain, maybe that's different. Like you can have your own practice, for example, but with anesthesia, like general anesthesia or most of the subspecialties, you're attached to a procedure or a surgery or something like that. So I'm still working through that aspect and seeing like what trajectory I would want to take career-wise. But that's something I'm curious about in terms of independence per se, versus like being in a group or being in a practice or always being like attached to somebody. So I'm sure the attendings know more about that, but it's something I'm curious about.
Great. Thank you all so much for sharing. We're going to move on to the next question. It's from Birdie Wayu. I apologize if that is not the correct pronunciation, but she asked, how would taking a year off for a family emergency possibly affect an applicant? So maybe one or two responses here.
I serve on our residency recruitment committee. And so I will say if there is a gap in your training for any reason, the thing to do is explain it in your interviews or allude to it in your personal statement if it's appropriate. Everyone has things that come up. It's not a huge detriment. It's just sometimes needs some explanation so that people can know more of your story. And more than not, it's probably going to be enriching to you once you share kind of what you conquered in that year.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. McAdoo. Next, we have a question from Ashley Moore. This question is actually for Dr. Martinez. She is a current second-year medical student, and she is also very interested in anesthesia. She was wondering what you think the personality of an anesthesiologist would be.
I was talking to my medical students about this just because I feel like, honestly, like within the field, we have one of the best personalities. People are very much hard workers, but also like amazing to get along with, very easy to get along with. You know, in residency, you'll be having 24-hour calls. You'll be called in the middle of the night for a trauma, critical care, critical surgery that has to go really quickly. So, you know, you have to call each other to wake up in the middle of the night, start a surgery. You have to talk with surgeons who might be stressed about the procedures. You have to talk to the emergency department. And I feel like the personality, they just going with the flow and understanding, like somebody was saying, situational awareness, know when to be serious, know when to be understanding of other surgeons' concerns. They're saying like, no, we have to do the surgery ASAP. Or on the other hand, as an anesthesiologist, you know, you have to think about the whole person, not just what the surgery entails. So you have to assess like, is this patient's heart function appropriate for the surgery? Are they fully optimized? Like what medications did they take labs? You just can't rush into things. So be able to be like cool, calm, and collected during those scenarios. But at the end of the day, I feel like as a resident and what my faculty also look for in medical students, it's just people who are like eager to learn, are excited about the field, Obviously, you know, being completely forward, you will have some medical students that are very much want to be hands-on, like what can I do, like, or just maybe sometimes honestly getting a little bit in the way. I feel like as residents, we're also very stressed and learning too, and you know, you have to make a good impression to your faculty, make sure that patient safety is always at the forefront. And so sometimes when we have medical students that are very hands-on, aren't doing things that they're supposed to, or you know, touching things when they're not being observed, it makes it a little bit stressful for us. So I always tell medical students, when you meet a resident, you're working with them for the day, just tell them from the get-go, hey, you know, I'm very excited to come into the field. Let me know how I could help. I want to be more of an assistant, a shadow, or just if that's what's best for the situation and the surgery today, or you know, whatever hands-on stuff you want to let me do. More excited, just let me know. Just let them play out what the day should look like. And at the end of the day, like I was saying, you know, you're working with colleagues in the middle of the night, and you want to work with somebody who's easygoing and you know you could have a good relationship with. So I think that's always helpful.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Martinez.
I would say
Go
when it
ahead.
comes to personality type, it's whatever you are. So don't change yourself to try to fit in. I think that's where a lot of medicine has been for years and years. And fortunately, we're starting to move away from that. The point of most residency programs, and I'm sure Dr. McAdoo could speak more, they weed out malignant personality types, ideally. So egomaniacs, if you're unsafe, if you're lazy, you should at least have a hard time getting through residency, if not being weeded out if you're unable to provide safe care for your patients. That said, you're left with some people that are super calm in stressful situations, some people that still freak out. I got coworkers that are super high strung. You've got folks that are super laissez-faire. You've got folks that are very precise and meticulous. You've got folks that will stay late to help a partner out or volunteer for extra call shifts to help people out. And then you have folks that will, you know, leave as soon as their shift is up. And, you know, no judgment on these different people. We're just all different. We have different personality types. And I think anesthesia is a field that's very conducive to all those different priorities that we have as people as well as physicians. So if you really, really value your free time, then maybe you're going to work at an ambulatory surgery center where you're done at 3 or 4 every day. Maybe you won't go into critical care where you're on call for a week at a time. But the field of anesthesia is broad and really has something for everybody.
Thank you so much for sharing, Dr. Bradley. Now we have questions from both Jane Onyemachi and Patricia Nicole. They seem to be asking the same thing. They are wondering about the work-life balance as an anesthesiologist, and if you guys could touch on that.
I think work-life balance is always a goal, but being in perfect balance is rare. For me, as an anesthesiologist, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I have a lot of hobbies. I'm very crafty. I do a lot of charcuterie boards. People think I do that full time, but I'm actually like a real anesthesiologist. So I think you find the balance in just prioritize. I kind of clump them together based on vacations or things that I want to do outside of medicine. And that keeps me fresh for my day job, that I can really cultivate my hobbies, spend time with friends and family, and then also commit myself to my work when I'm there. So for me, I wasn't as balanced when I worked full-time, one full-time equivalent or FTE. But once I decreased to 0.8, I found a lot more balance, because for me, I can't just be an anesthesiologist. But when I'm there, I'm an anesthesiologist. But outside of that, I think it's important to keep up with your hobbies and the things that kind of flesh you out as a human being.
So in residency, I think it will depend on your institution. Two, will depend on if you do a categorical program versus an advanced program, which is when you do 1 year of either internal medicine, surgery, or transitional year first, and then you do 3 years of anesthesia. So Your schedule will depend on that. For me personally, I think that it depends on the rotation I'm on. So if I'm doing like an ICU rotation, for example, that tends to have a lot more hours. So there you get a lot closer to like 70 to 80 hours on average. Internal medicine also has a lot more hours. When I'm on just the regular OR, that we have just our regular OR schedule where you do kind of like standard cases. Our weeks usually average somewhere to like 50, 60 hours a week, which is not too bad for a resident schedule, I would say. They try to get us out, if you're not on call, somewhere between 3:30 and 5. And then if you are on call, there's like a lot of different call schedules. But one of the standard weekday call schedules that we have, you typically get out somewhere between 7 and 9. And usually you only have that type of call maybe once or twice a week. And then we have a weekend call schedule as well. And because of the number of residents we have, it's very easy to switch your calls as well. So if you have something that comes up, you're able to, you're usually able to find somebody to switch with you. So I would say for me personally and for the program I'm at, I definitely have a lot better hours than a lot of my colleagues, but it's still a lot of work. So I'm like, hours are not nearly as good as like maybe psych or derm, but not nearly as bad as surgery, I would say, somewhere like that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Odomena. And we actually have Dr. Patton here. I'll allow him to introduce himself. Dr. Patton, can you hear me?
Yeah, just if you don't mind, just give me 1 minute.
Sure. I can give a quick recap about who he is. He is an assistant professor in regional anesthesia and acute pain medicine at the UCLA Department of Anesthesiology and Perioperative Medicine. So we look forward to hearing from him pretty soon. So in the meantime, I guess we can move on to the next question. And you can just signal whenever you're ready, Dr. Patton. So Stacy Bawa was wondering if you guys could talk about your day-to-day tasks or duties that you have outside of the OR. For instance, are you able to work in areas that are not, I suppose, inside the OR?
Okay.
Dr. Patton?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. It's a little
Okay.
grainy.
Yeah, so I texted Steven. I just finished my day today. I was in the GI suite, which is always eventful. You never know what you're gonna get. But I'm Doc JP3. I'm John Patton. I did my undergrad at UC Irvine and med school at UC Irvine. I did a post-bac at UC Irvine, which is, for those who don't know, is an additional year of basically undergraduate training before applying to med school. While at UC Irvine, I did the dual degree program for medicine and business. So I have an MD, MBA. After finishing at Irvine, I stayed and did a prelim year in medicine there. And then I went to Stanford for anesthesia residency, where I finished in 2020. And just completed my fellowship at Cedars-Sinai. I'm current at Cedars right now, and I'll be heading over to UCLA. And so, a little bit about me. Did I cover everything?
You covered most of it. You were coming in and out just a little bit, but I think we got most of your commentary there.
Okay, good.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. And feel free to jump in at any point. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next question from Stacy Bawa. She was wondering if you guys could describe your tasks outside of the OR.
One of my non-OR duties is working in our preoperative evaluation clinic. So about 1 day a week, I work in the clinic where patients come in, usually a week or two prior to surgery, where we review their medical history and make sure they're kind of tuned up and appropriate for surgery, give them recommendations on their medication management, and order any consultations that we need before they head to surgery. So that's an important role for us and our trainees to kind of know what comes into the planning before someone goes to surgery, how to manage certain medications, anticoagulants, blood pressure medications, and diabetes medications, so that patients are in their best shape going forward to surgery. So that is one of the non-OR duties that I serve for my department.
Yeah, as a regional anesthesiologist and acute pain specialist, we spend a lot of time outside of the OR, actually. Anesthesiologists in general, we are perioperative physicians. So that means we manage patients, before they go back for surgery, during and after. I serve on the acute pain service from time to time, which on the acute pain service, we may be managing patients who had just had surgery, or we might see patients coming in through the ED who have, needs, acute pain needs, or there be traumas, people who have hip fractures who need to be optimized before going to surgery, or rib fractures who need to be managed because those usually for the most part are non-surgically managed. And so the acute pain service would get involved to sort of help patients with their needs in terms of pain control. Some of the other things that I'm looking forward to doing as well, with my MBA, are getting more involved with sort of operational management and the business side of medicine. A lot of anesthesiologists you'll find leading the ORs, for example, in the efforts at least for OR leadership with nursing usually, and then also even all the way up to the C-suite. At Santa Monica Hospital for UCLA, the chief medical officer is an anesthesiologist who will be one of my faculty mentors. So looking to get involved with some of those. So yeah, there's a lot we do outside the OR. I'll let some of the other guests or panelists here speak on what they do as well.
Yeah, I put this in the chat, but outside the OR, so typical week for me in the military, doing a day or two in the OR, but that's peds cases. I usually have a resident. I'll do a day on the acute pain service. I'll do a day running the board, and then some maybe a day of call. Outside the OR, I work on a couple of committees, the medical ethics committee, pharmacy and therapeutics. Depending on where you practice, you should have a certain amount of protected time, which means you don't work the full 60 hours a week or whatever it is. They actually give you time to do outside pursuits, including resident education. Depending on where you're at, if you're at an academic institution, that's more typical that the attendings have protected time. If you're at a hospital that's contracts with a private anesthesia group, those folks probably just get paid to do anesthesia. So any teaching that they're doing is on their own time. I really don't have much protected time. So on my free time, I am building lectures for the residents that I work with. I'm building a simulation curriculum, mostly because I invested in the education of the next generation of anesthesiologists.
Do we have any other contributions? Oh, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say one last thing. Steven's being modest. He's also going to be ICU trained as well, which anesthesiologists you find in the intensive care unit, especially the surgical ICUs, but even at Stanford, our anesthesiologists were NICU attendings as well. So that's a medical ICU. You also will find us on the labor and delivery side as well. Usually at the academic institutions, the OB anesthesiologists typically are the fellowship trained OB anesthesiologists, and unless they were grandfathered or grandmothered in, and so more recently now they're usually going to be OB anesthesiologists. But that being said, in the community, anesthesiologists we can do that as well. We can also help the laboring individuals with pain, for their needs. So those are two other areas where you're likely to find us as well. And of course, we do airways all around the hospital. So anesthesiologists, there's a saying, don't panic and call anesthesiology. We can be found anywhere whenever there's a crisis. So.
Great. And so, in the interest of time, I'm going to be moving on to the next question. We have one from Adaku Iko. She's wondering, given the DO-MD merger, what do you foresee the trends being in the future in terms of DOs matching, MDs matching, given that these residencies have been merged? Anyone have an opinion? If not, that's okay too.
So I personally, from medical school and even now in residency, trained with a lot of DO physicians, like a lot of the attendings, a lot of the residents, and a lot. I'm an MD, but I saw a lot of them during my clinical rotations because we went to a lot of hospitals outside of the hospital that was affiliated with my home institution, and I really never saw a difference personally. So I believe somebody who's on like admissions committee maybe could speak more to it, but for me personally, I think that a lot of times people look at the applicant as a whole. So I guess that would be my take on it, at least if I was helping to choose applicants.
I'll come in as well. We also, as she said, try to look at the applicant as a whole. So whether you're coming from an MD or a DO program, your application should speak for itself. We're looking for your letters of recommendation, your clinical experience, a true sense of why you decided to come into anesthesiology. So your personal statement should speak to that in some respect and tell a little bit about who you are. So I wouldn't say that your degree MD versus DO weighs heavily. Our former program director was a DO. We have DOs in our department as well as MDs. I hope that answers the question.
All right, thank you, Dr. McAdoo. Next, we have a question from Victoria Afolayan. She's wondering, what are some things medical students should be doing, especially in the first 2 years, to prepare for a successful residency application?
I think a lot of people mentioned that they ended up going into anesthesiology towards the end of medical school. So, like in their third year, I know some students now who are in their fourth year who just decided. So, I just always tell students keep being your best self in whatever rotation you're on. Because I was interested in family medicine, I wanted to make sure I was doing well in every rotation that I was doing, given that family medicine practitioners work with all specialties. And it's honestly pretty much the same in anesthesia. So when you come into training, you're honestly in the OR, you are the internist of the operating room. You assess their diabetes, do they have COPD, do they have a smoking history, do they have cancer? So as the internist of the OR, you should be able to, interpret all the patient's consults, all the suggestions from their primary care providers, and to see how you can adapt that in order for the patient to have a safe surgery, successful surgery. And so what I tell people, it's like I actually really enjoyed my OB-GYN rotation. I loved my pediatric rotation. I was one of those students who loved all my rotations and I could see myself doing all of them, but ultimately I chose anesthesia. But because of that, I was able to work well with faculty, with residents when I was doing those rotations and get good recommendations. I know some students are always like, oh, I need 2 anesthesia letters to rec, I need 3 letters. For myself, the recommendation that I got from a former program director was that exactly, that he likes to see recommendations from different specialties. Again, because we work with so many different specialties, they want to see that you're, a team player, you understand different physiology, like outside of just the acute OR setting. And I think that's definitely helpful because it shows not only a lot about your personality, being able to get along well with others, but also that you have like an a diverse interest in different fields, and you're able to incorporate that into your anesthetic plans.
Any other contributions? If not, then I'll be moving on to the next question from Toby Mogalu. He's wondering, what were some of your deciding factors for choosing the programs you each chose? And do you guys have any advice about ranking programs, especially in the virtual era?
Well, for me, number one ended up being location, because I'm from the East Coast and I wanted to be near family, at least within driving distance. So I'm like 6.5 hours away from Maryland here in Rochester. And then I really, really, really had a good experience when I went to my program physically. Although I'm a second-year resident, I just barely missed the virtual era. So I did go to my interviews in person. And what else? I really liked the program itself in terms of its structure and how they were number one categorical. So you do all 4 years there. And then they do a really good job trying to match up some of the specialty rotations that you do with the subspecialties in anesthesia. So for example, if you're going to do your neuro anesthesia rotation, they'll have you do a few weeks of neurology floors. And then you get to do 2 weeks of neurology EEG right before. So you're getting familiar from a medical standpoint and kind of translating that once you are doing the anesthesia side of it. Another thing was the hours in general. It's weird, like anesthesia is interesting. I don't know how everybody else's programs, but I feel like you work harder the more senior you get, which is kind of the opposite for a lot of other specialties because you know more and you can do more. So when you start out, you don't know as much. So you don't like take call as much, or you don't have, because you can't take all the specialty calls because you haven't done them. So my first year was not really, like most of my intense rotations were when I was off service. So like ICU, emergency medicine, internal medicine. And then for the operating room, they were, as I got more experience, the schedule got busier, but in the beginning, you can't take a lot of the specialty calls. So it's not really as bad. But then now in my second year, I take a lot more call. And then I see my senior residents take a lot more call. So, but they do a really good job of trying to balance the hours. And because of the number of residents we have, like I was saying earlier, on like a regular OR shift for me right now, like a regular week, I'm somewhere between like 50 and 60 hours. But then ICU, or if you're on like a specialty like cardiac or transplant, then you get closer to 70, 80 hours. So those are some of the things I really enjoyed about my program and what made me choose it.
I mentioned this in the chat. University of Chicago had brand new operating rooms. They have absolutely beautiful facilities. A couple other places. I like nice things, and I knew I'd be happy coming to work. I went to some grungy ORs on some tours. Hopefully, they get you a camera or something so you can look inside. I wouldn't be happy in some of those grungy ORs I went to. I was super happy. Everything was beautiful. There's TV screens everywhere. It was fantastic. In location, it was in Chicago.
I chose also.
Steven's not lying. Yes. Oh, I was just gonna say Steven's lying. The Chicago hospital looks like a JW Marriott, but the Stanford hospital looks like Four Seasons. So I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Location mattered a lot to me. My family was in Arkansas, so that was really nice for me. And then the breadth of experience, the case mix, the case acuity. I think that's really important. You want to see as much as you can as a resident before you're the one who's most responsible for how things go down in the OR. So I really wanted to see everything, do everything, have a good mix of patients based on age, based on comorbidities, and then as well as the procedural mix.
This is a question we get. I'll be quick. This is a question we get a lot. What do we do now with everything being virtual? Like, how do we determine what's going to be a good fit? There are definitely benefits from it being virtual in terms of obviously, cost of travel and being able to sort of save on that and time. But it's going to be hard for you to know if you're not familiar with the location, if that location has everything that you need, right, to be successful. I think when you think about matching, most of the good programs, almost all of them, will probably at the end of the day make you a great anesthesiologist. And there are going to be programs that are going to be in transition, and they may happen before you interview, so you'll hear about it, and they may not happen until you get there, so you won't hear about it. So at the end of the day, you have to find a place or a program that's going to have all the resources and support there that's going to basically help you get through residency, and also make sure that you're happy outside of residency as well. So if you have like certain needs or interests, you should really be trying to figure out if those interests and needs are going to be well supported in those areas that you're looking. And I do think that a lot of people are going to ultimately end up regionally probably staying closer to home just because it just makes more sense virtually. But as things get better with the pandemic, there'll probably be a hybrid situation where you can choose to go or likely probably do a virtual. So yeah, ultimately it comes down to you. Make a list. You have to put the pluses and minuses down, and hopefully you end up somewhere where it has more pluses than minuses.
All right, so we have time for one last question, and that's going to be from Ashley Moore. She wants to know how you feel about not having long-term relationships with your patients.
I feel really good about it. I don't know. It's so funny because I feel like sometimes people like empaths and people who are like very into things, it's almost like maybe it's better for me to not follow up on this and know like every single thing. And so a lot of times when you do anesthesia, especially if your patient is inpatient or in the ICU, like somebody mentioned before, you will still check on them and see how they're doing and how they're progressing just to make sure they're okay. And I personally have had a lot of my patients over again. Like I saw one of my first ICU rotations was last August. I was in the SICU, and I've seen like 3 or 4 of the patients that I took care in the SICU. Like I would be like, this name sounds so familiar, and I'll just search my name in their chart, and I'm like, I took care of this person in the SICU. Like, so that has happened to me many times. So you do get some continuity of care in that sense, but if you do pain management, you do get continuity of care, and that's a specialty within anesthesiology. So you just have to decide based on your personality what's important to you. Some people really like the transient, relationships with patients, and there's also that kind of challenge or, of building that relationship really quickly, getting that person to trust you, with their life and like within 5 minutes. So I think that that's really cool.
Anyone else want to comment about not having continuous care?
Yeah. Have profound people who, for example, labor individuals again, maybe
Dr. Patton, you're coming in and out. Your connection.
Is this better?
Much better.
No? Okay. I was just going to say, people, I worried about that because I thought that I would want continuity of care. I really did. And I still, to some extent, like to see how patients are doing over the course of time, but I totally agree. And I also just was saying that I think people underestimate our ability to have profound impacts on people's lives, even in a short amount of time. If you go to the labor and delivering suite, you're seeing people come back, more than once for deliveries and whatnot. They definitely don't forget their anesthesiologist. They'll tell everyone about you, right? And so, yeah, we put patients to sleep, and you may only see them in the preoperative area for like the 5 or 10 minutes, and then take them back. But those are really impactful 5-10 minutes, and we do a lot for our patients to help them with anxiety and pain and just quality of life. So, the continuity is not going to be as good as someone who has a clinic, but there is an ability for you to actually still feel like you really had a profound impact on someone's life in anesthesia.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the contributions. In the interest of time, I'd like to go down the row and ask each of you, if you had one line of wisdom to share with our audience, what would it be? If we could start with Dr. McAdoo, yeah.
I'll start. I would just say be your authentic self. Practice medicine in a way that complements who you are. You bring something unique to the table and share that in what you do. And as Dr. Bradley was saying, don't try to change to fit into this mold, but bring who you are to the table. That's it.
Yeah, I would say that we're all on this same journey on the same railroad track. We're just a couple years ahead of you. You're going to be where we are very soon. Keep working hard. Your work ethic will shine through and get you through. A shameless self plug, I am the host of the Black Doctors podcast, where I share the stories of different minority healthcare professionals. I've interviewed quite a few anesthesiologists, so you can hear their stories about their different practice models, as well as other different specialties. So thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for sharing. Would you mind dropping the name of that podcast in the chat? Great, thank you. Dr. Patton, any words of wisdom?
Yeah, I would say anesthesia is very humbling. You know, I have done now 4 years of anesthesia, and I feel pretty good about what I'm doing, and I feel ready to go over to UCLA and be an attending. But even today, I had a tough day. You know, I still like will text Steven or some of my colleagues and sort of ask for their advice. And you have to maintain humility. You know, it's a very serious job. Like I said, we take care of people in dire straits. And so just know what you're good at, know what you're not good at, keep working hard, like Steven said, and take care of yourself as well. I mean, this pandemic has been super crazy, obviously, and everything that we've experienced over the last year and a half. You know, obviously keep your goals in mind in terms of what you want to do career-wise, but make sure you take care of yourself as well. I can't be a good anesthesiologist if I don't take care of myself. So if you need help for any reason, just make sure you're reaching out and you have a community of people that you can connect with that can help you sort of through this process.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patton. Dr. Martinez, any words of wisdom?
Yes, actually, that was mine. It's more so to say, like, don't be afraid to reach out. I know for myself, it was very intimidating, you know, going into a field that where there aren't a lot of people who look like you. And so this is why we're here. You know, we're taking our time to chat with you guys. For as many of these that we do, sometimes we'll just get like 1-2 follow-up emails afterwards. And that's totally fine. Like whether I get 1 or 2, those are the connections that I've been able to have that have been long lasting. I've been able to see some people that I met on Twitter, you know, help them with the personal statements, advise them through whatever quote unquote red flags they have on their application, or just let them know how to shine best during their interviews. And I feel like if I didn't have that when I was applying, I would not be here. So it's like programs like this. And then, you know, we're here for you. That's why we're here. Don't be afraid to reach out. You have our emails, you have our connection. Best of luck with everything. And yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez. And finally, Dr. Odumena, would you mind sharing your words of wisdom?
Sure. Mine would be reflective. Take moments to reflect on the days that you have, and also like over months or years or whatever it is, and kind of use that to be able to appreciate how far you've come. I think today is kind of a reflective day for me because I'm like a baby in anesthesia, and I can't believe I'm on this panel with like attendings and soon to be attending. So it's like a really humbling moment for me to be able to say like I actually am in this field. And every day is a privilege to take care of patients, you know, for people to open themselves up to you. So I think if you kind of stop at different times and just reflect and be able to appreciate the things that happen, that's so helpful for being able to not only appreciate but move forward and see how you can constantly improve. And in the chat, sorry I wasn't able to respond because for some reason I don't have the access, but if I could definitely talk to people later.
Thank you so much for sharing. And side note, Uzo went to my school. She was my mentor while she was here. I'm so proud of you. Just a side note. So essentially that concludes this meeting. I hope you guys have enjoyed your time here. If there are no more questions, I just want to say thank you to our amazing panelists and thank you to everyone who came out tonight. We appreciate your support of the SNMA and our membership. And for those of you in the audience, please follow us on Instagram at SNMA_official and on Twitter at SNMA. Also, please like us on Facebook as well. But most importantly, if you are not a national member yet, please visit snma.org to sign up and get connected. In addition, if you enjoyed this panel, we will have a few more lined up within the month. So September 15th, we will be hosting a dermatology panel. September 22nd will be our combined residency panel. And September 29th will be our surgical subspecialties panel. So once again, thank you all for coming out. And if there are no more questions, I hope everyone has had a wonderful evening and continues to have a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you.